Daniel Carter sat at his desk and stared at the pile of reports in front of him. The documents glowed softly on his screen, each one needing his approval before the end of the day. He rubbed his tired eyes and wondered, not for the first time, if becoming a diplomat had been the right choice. Outside his window, Galactic Unity Station Sigma 7 hummed with activity. The massive space station orbited a quiet star system, far from any planet. It was neutral ground where 43 different alien species met to talk, trade, and sometimes argue. Daniel had been here for 6 months now, representing humanity in a galaxy that still wasn't sure what to make of his kind. He glanced at the small screen on his desk that showed images from Earth. A lion yawned in the African sun. A tiger splashed through a river. A house cat batted at a toy mouse. Daniel smiled. Before becoming a diplomat, he had been a wildlife biologist. He missed those days sometimes when the most complicated thing he dealt with was tracking animal migration patterns. A soft chime rang through his office. Daniel looked up at the time display. 3 hours until the diplomatic reception. He should probably review his notes about the Kryn delegation. They were new to the station, too, arriving just 2 weeks after the humans. But unlike humans who tried to smile and make friends with everyone, the Kryn kept to themselves. The Kryn looked like giant cats, if cats could walk on 2 legs and stood 7 feet tall. They had sleek fur in shades of blue and silver, eyes that seemed to glow in dim light, and claws that could slice through metal. They came from a world where everything wanted to kill you, and they had become the top predators through strength and speed. Most species on the station were afraid of the Kryn. Daniel understood why. When a Kryn walked down a corridor, other aliens pressed themselves against the walls. When a Kryn spoke, their voice rumbled like distant thunder. When a Kryn looked at you, you felt like prey. But Daniel had spent years watching predators on Earth. He knew that fangs and claws didn't tell the whole story. He had seen lions play with their cubs. He had watched wolves care for injured pack members. He had observed tigers spending hours grooming their young. Predators weren't mindless killers. They were parents, protectors, and teachers. Still, the Kryn leader, Ambassador Vex Thera, made it clear that the Kryn had no interest in human friendship. Every meeting was cold and formal. Every conversation ended as quickly as possible. The ambassador looked at humans the way a wolf might look at a rabbit, with barely hidden contempt for something so much weaker. Daniel turned back to his reports and tried to focus. The words blurred together. He needed a break. He pulled up his collection of Earth nature videos and selected one at random. A documentary about big cats in the wild began to play on his screen. The sound turned low. 20 minutes later, Daniel was so absorbed in watching a mother cheetah teach her cubs to hunt that he almost missed the soft scratching sound coming from under his desk. He froze. The scratching came again, followed by a quiet chirping noise. Daniel slowly pushed his chair back and looked down. 2 pairs of eyes stared back at him from the shadows under his desk. They glowed softly in the dim light, just like the eyes of the adult Kryn, but smaller. Much smaller. Daniel's heart jumped. He recognized these eyes. He had seen them at the diplomatic reception last week, peeking out from behind Ambassador Vex Thera's legs. The ambassador's cubs, Kes and Mira, if he remembered their names correctly. The cubs were about the size of human 6-year-olds, with oversized ears that swiveled at every sound and long tails that twitched nervously. Their fur was softer looking than their parents', more gray than blue, and their claws were small and retracted. For a long moment, Daniel and the cubs just looked at each other. His mind raced through possibilities. Why were they here? Where was their guardian? Should he call security? Should he try to find Ambassador Vex Thera? Then his training as a wildlife biologist kicked in. He recognized the body language. The cubs weren't aggressive. Their ears were forward with curiosity, not flat with fear or anger. Their tails twitched with nervousness but didn't lash with hostility. They were just curious youngsters who had wandered somewhere they probably shouldn't be. Daniel took a slow breath and lowered himself to crouch beside his desk. He kept his movements smooth and non-threatening, the same way he would approach a wild animal. He didn't reach toward them. He didn't make sudden moves. He just made himself smaller and less scary. One of the cubs, the slightly larger one, took a small step forward. Its nose twitched as it sniffed the air. Daniel stayed perfectly still. The cub's eyes shifted to the screen on Daniel's desk where the cheetah documentary was still playing. Its ears perked up. The second cub noticed too and crept forward to get a better look. Daniel watched their reaction carefully. The cubs were fascinated by the images of Earth's big cats. Their heads tilted as they watched the cheetahs run across the African plains. Their tails started to sway gently, a sign of interest rather than agitation. Moving very slowly, Daniel reached for his desk and pulled up a different video. This one showed lions in a pride with several cubs tumbling over each other in play. The Kryn cubs made a soft chirping sound, their version of excitement. The larger cub crept out from under the desk completely now. It sat down just a few feet from Daniel, eyes glued to the screen. The second cub followed, though it stayed slightly behind its sibling. Daniel pulled up his translation device, a small tablet that could convert speech between different alien languages. He tapped a few buttons and set it to Kryn language mode. Then he spoke softly. "Hello, my name is Daniel. What are your names?" The device hummed and translated his words into a series of purrs and chirps. The larger cub looked at him with wide eyes. After a moment, it made a soft sound. The translator converted it to text on the screen. "I am Kes, this is Mira. Are those creatures from your world?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes. They are called big cats. They are predators like you." Kes moved closer, fascinated. "They look like us, but different, smaller, and only 4 legs." Daniel smiled. "Yes. But they hunt. They protect their families and they play, just like young Kryn probably do." Mira finally spoke up, her voice quieter than her siblings. "We are not supposed to play. We are supposed to learn dignity and strength." The sadness in those translated words struck Daniel hard. He thought about all the young animals he had observed over the years. Play wasn't just fun. It was how young predators learned to hunt, learned to fight, learned to survive. It was essential, not optional. He pulled up another video, this one showing tiger cubs wrestling with each other while their mother watched nearby. "The cubs play to learn. Even the strongest predators on my world know that young ones need time to be young." Both cubs watched the video with intense focus. Their tails had stopped twitching nervously and now swayed with the rhythm of the playing tigers on screen. Daniel saw the tension leave their small bodies as they relaxed. "Can we stay and watch more?" Kes asked. "Everyone else tells us to be quiet and stand straight." "You show us interesting things," Daniel hesitated. He knew he should probably contact someone, let the Kryn delegation know where their cubs were. But he also knew what would happen. The cubs would be scolded, taken back to their quarters, and told once again to behave with perfect dignity. He made a decision. "You can stay for a little while, but we need to let your parent know you are safe. Ambassador Vexithara will be worried." Kes's ears drooped. "If we tell, we have to go back. We are always being watched, always being told what to do. We just wanted to explore." Daniel understood that feeling. He had felt the same way sometimes as a child, trapped by expectations and rules. But he also knew the panic that a missing child could cause. He had seen it in humans. He suspected it would be the same for the Kryn, no matter how tough they appeared. "Let me think about the best way to do this. For now, you can watch the videos. I will make sure you stay safe." The cubs settled in beside his desk, their eyes fixed on the screen as Daniel pulled up more documentaries. He watched them for a moment, these 2 young predators from a distant world, and saw only children seeking a moment of peace. Then his communicator buzzed. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. It was a station-wide alert. 2 Kryn cubs were missing. All personnel were asked to report any sightings immediately. The message was marked urgent. Daniel looked at the cubs, who were now completely absorbed in a video of leopards climbing trees. They had no idea that their disappearance had triggered a crisis. He had to make a choice, and he had to make it fast. The longer he waited, the worse the situation would become. But he also knew that how he handled this moment would determine not just the fate of these 2 cubs, but possibly the relationship between humans and Kryn for years to come. Daniel took a deep breath and reached for his communicator. Whatever happened next, he would make sure these cubs were treated with kindness. They deserved at least that much. Ambassador Vexithara stood in the empty quarters and felt something the Kryn were never supposed to feel. Fear. Raw, primal fear that made every instinct scream. The cubs were gone. Kes and Mira had been here just 2 hours ago, under the watchful eye of their guardian. But when Vexithara returned from a brief meeting, The Guardian was asleep and the cubs had vanished. The ambassador's claws extended involuntarily, scoring marks in the metal wall. Among the Kryn, losing track of one's offspring was the deepest shame. It meant weakness. It meant failure. It meant the parent was unworthy of their bloodline. But beneath the shame, beneath the dishonor, there was something more powerful. Terror. The cubs were young, barely trained in station protocols. They could be hurt. They could be lost. They could be in danger. Vexthara turned to Ralthor, the second in command. Find them. Search every corridor, every room, every ventilation shaft if necessary. I want them found now. Ralthor bowed his head. At once, Ambassador. Should we request assistance from station security? The question hung in the air. Asking for help would mean admitting the situation to other species. It would mean showing weakness. But it would also mean finding the cubs faster. Pride warred with desperation. Finally, desperation won, yes. Issue a station-wide alert. Tell them the cubs are missing. Tell them to report any sightings immediately. Within minutes, the alert went out. Within 10 minutes, the entire station knew that the Kryn cubs were missing. And within 15 minutes, panic began to spread. In the human sector, Lieutenant Jake Morrison read the alert and felt his jaw tighten. Missing Kryn cubs. That could mean anything. Were they really lost, or had something happened to them? And if something had happened, would the Kryn blame humans? He remembered Earth's history, how fear and misunderstanding had led to terrible things, how accusations could spiral out of control, how innocent people could be blamed when tragedy struck. Jake hit his communicator. All human personnel report to your designated areas. No one leaves the sector until we know what is happening. This is a precaution, not an accusation. Just stay put and stay calm. In her laboratory, Dr. Sophie Grant received the same alert but had a different reaction. She had spent years studying alien psychology and child development across species. She understood what was happening better than most. The Kryn were experiencing what humans called a parental crisis. Logic and reason shut down when your children were in danger. It didn't matter if you were human, Kryn, or any other species. The response was the same. Find them, protect them. Nothing else mattered. Sophie grabbed her tablet and headed for the diplomatic wing. Maybe she could help mediate, help other species understand that the Kryn weren't being aggressive. They were being parents. In the corridors, Kryn guards moved with military precision. They sealed off sections and demanded access to security footage. They questioned anyone who had been near the Kryn quarters in the last 3 hours. Their voices were clipped, their movements sharp and controlled. To the Kryn, this was standard search procedure. To everyone else, it looked like barely contained aggression. Species that had been wary of the Kryn before now became genuinely frightened. A Threxian diplomat, whose crystalline body chimed with agitation, filed a formal complaint. The Kryn are terrorizing the station. They are threatening peaceful species and demanding information as if they have authority over us all. Sophie intercepted the complaint before it reached the main council. She found the Threxian diplomat in a side corridor, their crystal structure flickering with stress. Ambassador, please understand what is happening. The Kryn are not attacking. They are searching for their young. Imagine if your offspring were missing. How would you react? The Threxian's crystal structure slowed its flickering slightly. The Threxian did not reproduce in the same way, growing new crystals through a careful process that took decades. But they understood the concept of protecting what you had created. I would search every molecule of this station, the Threxian admitted, but I would not threaten others in the process. Are they truly threatening, or are they desperate? Sophie asked gently. Fear can look like anger when you do not understand the species expressing it. The Threxian considered this and finally agreed to withdraw the complaint for now. But Sophie knew the damage was already done. Other species had seen the Kryn at their most vulnerable, and vulnerability looked like violence to those who didn't understand it. Meanwhile, Vexthara refused most offers of help. The Gen offered their advanced scanning technology. The Vorgath offered their security teams. The humans offered their tracking expertise. Vexthara declined them all. We will find our own cubs. The ambassador's voice was ice and stone, but Ralthor was more practical. In a private moment with the ambassador, he spoke carefully. We need help. The station is too large. The cubs could be anywhere. Our pride matters less than their safety. Vexithara's ears flattened against the skull. You dare question my judgment? I dare to care about Kes and Mira more than I care about your honor. Ralthor's words were bold, dangerous even, but they were true. For a moment, Vexithera looked ready to strike. Then the ambassador's shoulders sagged just slightly. You are right. Accept the Chittic's scanning offer. Their electromagnetic senses might detect the cub's biosignatures. The insectoid Chittic arrived within minutes, their multiple limbs carrying sophisticated scanning equipment. They moved through the corridors with quick efficiency, their antennae twitching as they searched for the unique electromagnetic patterns that young Kryn produced. In Daniel's office, the cubs remained blissfully unaware of the chaos they had caused. They sat cross-legged on the floor watching a documentary about snow leopards. Their tails swished happily, their ears perked up at every new scene. Daniel had muted his communicator after sending one message to Sophie Grant. He trusted her to handle the situation diplomatically. For now, he focused on keeping the cubs calm and comfortable. Why did the small ones climb so high? Mira asked, pointing at a snow leopard cub scaling a cliff. To learn, Daniel explained. Young predators need to practice. They need to make mistakes in safe environments so they can succeed when it matters. We are not allowed to make mistakes, Kes said quietly. Mistakes bring shame to our family. Daniel felt a pang of sympathy. What happens if you make a mistake? We are corrected. We are reminded of our duty. We are told that we represent all Kryn, and weakness in us is weakness in our people. Mira's voice was matter-of-fact, as if this was simply how the world worked. That is a heavy weight for young shoulders, Daniel said softly. Kes looked at him with those two old eyes. Is it different for human young? Sometimes. We try to let children be children. We know they will grow up soon enough. Childhood should be a time for learning and playing and, yes, making mistakes. That is how humans learn to be strong adults. The cubs absorbed this information silently. Then Mira asked, Are we making a mistake now? By being here? Daniel chose his words carefully. You are being curious. Curiosity is not a mistake. It is how all intelligent beings learn about the universe. But your parent is probably very worried. We need to let them know you are safe. Kes's ears drooped. Then we have to leave. Then we have to go back to standing straight and being perfect. Not necessarily. Daniel pulled up a new video, this one showing a human family at a zoo. Children laughed and pointed at animals while their parents watched with soft expressions. Sometimes parents just need to know their children are happy and safe. Maybe your parent needs to see that too. Elsewhere on the station, the search was becoming more intense. The Chittic scanners had found traces of the cubs' biosignatures in several corridors, but the trail was confusing. The cubs had wandered extensively before settling somewhere. Vexithera followed the scanning team, hope and fear warring in every step. The ambassador's usual rigid posture had softened slightly with exhaustion and worry. In a rare private moment, Ralthor saw something he had never seen before. The ambassador's eyes were damp. Among the Kryn, showing tears was admitting defeat. But here, alone in a side corridor, Vexithera finally let the mask slip. They are so young, the ambassador whispered. So small. I have been so focused on teaching them strength that I forgot they are still children. If something has happened to them because I was too harsh, too demanding, Ralthor placed a careful hand on the ambassador's shoulder. We will find them. And when we do, perhaps we can find a better balance between strength and childhood. Sophie's communicator buzzed. It was a coded message from Daniel. She read it quickly and understood. The cubs were safe. They were with Daniel. But the situation needed to be handled carefully. She made her way through the crowded corridors toward the Kryn search teams. She needed to find Vexithera. She needed to explain that the cubs were fine, but that how they were returned would matter for everyone's future. As she walked, Sophie passed other species watching the search with various emotions, fear, curiosity, judgment. She heard whispered conversations about whether the Kryn should have been allowed to bring cubs to a diplomatic station at all. Gen Diplomat spoke loudly enough for others to hear. This proves what we have always said. The Kryn are too emotional, too volatile. They cannot be trusted with positions of authority in the galactic community. Sophie led Vexithera to a small conference room away from curious eyes. The ambassador moved like a predator ready to strike at any threat, but Sophie could see the desperation beneath the aggression. She had spent enough time studying Kryn body language to recognize when their military bearing was just a mask for fear. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Vexthara turned to face Sophie, claws extended just slightly. "Where are my cubs?" "Are they hurt?" "They are completely safe. They are with Daniel Carter, the human diplomat. They found their way to his office and have been there for the past few hours." Sophie spoke calmly and clearly. The relief that washed over Vexthara was visible. The ambassador's shoulders dropped, the claws retracted, and for just a moment the mask cracked completely. Then training reasserted itself. Why did this human not report them immediately? Because he wanted to make sure they felt safe before they were returned. Because he recognized that they were not lost. They were exploring. And because he understood that how we handle this moment matters for everyone involved. Vexthara's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if I would harm my own cubs, no. But I think you would discipline them. I think you would be so relieved and so angry that you might forget they are just children who wanted a break from being perfect." Sophie met the ambassador's gaze steadily. The words hung between them like a challenge. Vexthara could have taken offense, could have ended the conversation right there. Instead, after a long silence, the ambassador spoke quietly. "You are correct. I would have scolded them. I would have reminded them of their duty and their honor. I would have made sure they understood the shame they brought upon our family. And do you think that would have helped them? Or would it have made them feel even more trapped?" Vexthara was quiet for a long moment. The ambassador walked to the window and stared out at the stars. In Kryn culture, strength is everything. Weakness is death. We teach our young to be warriors from the moment they can walk. There is no room for softness, but they are still children, Sophie said gently. Even warriors must be allowed to be young first. That is easy for humans to say. Your world is soft. You do not understand what it means to come from a planet where every day is a battle for survival. The ambassador's voice was tired, not angry. Our world was not always soft. Humans survived ice ages, predators, diseases, wars. We know about harsh worlds. But we learned something important. Children who are allowed to play, to explore, to make mistakes in safety become stronger adults than those who are forced to be perfect from birth. Vexthara turned back to face Sophie. "What do you propose? Come with me to Daniel's office. See your cubs. See how they are, and then decide how you want to respond. But I ask you to go alone. No guards, no witnesses. Just you and your children." The suggestion made the ambassador uncomfortable. Sophie could see it in the way Vexthara's tail twitched. Showing vulnerability, even to one's own offspring, went against every Kryn instinct. But so did leaving cubs in distress very well. "Lead the way." They walked through the corridors together. Sophie dismissed the guards and search teams they passed, telling them the cubs had been found safe. The relief was palpable, but so was the curiosity. Everyone wanted to know where the cubs had been, what had happened. Sophie ignored the questions and kept moving. Vexthara followed, each step heavy with mixed emotions. Relief that the cubs were safe. Shame that they had run away. Fear about what this meant for the family's honor. They reached the human sector. Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward, looking ready to provide security escort. Sophie shook her head. "This is a family matter, Jake. Give them space." Morrison hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. He trusted Sophie's judgment, even if his instincts screamed to provide protection. They stopped outside Daniel's office. Sophie turned to Vexthara. "I will wait out here. Take as long as you need. Remember, they are not criminals. They are children who wanted a moment of freedom." Vexthara stood frozen at the door. The ambassador's hand moved toward the door panel, then dropped. Then reached again. The hesitation was so unlike the confident Kryn leader that Sophie felt a pang of sympathy. What if they do not want to see me? What if they ran from me, not from duty? The vulnerability in that question was startling. Sophie touched the ambassador's arm gently. "There is only one way to find out. But I think you will be surprised." Vexthara pressed the door panel. The door slid open with a quiet whisper. Inside, Daniel had prepared the cubs as best he could. He had explained that their parent was worried and that it was time to go home. He had promised to show them more Earth animals another time. The cubs had agreed, though reluctantly. But when the door opened and Vexthara stepped through, all of Daniel's careful preparation flew out of his mind. The cubs' reaction was immediate and instinctive. They turned and saw their parent. For one frozen moment, they were perfectly still. Then their tails started wagging and they rushed forward, all dignity forgotten. Vexthara dropped to one knee and opened both arms. The cubs crashed into the embrace with enough force to make the ambassador rock backward. 3 sets of arms wrapped around each other. Three tails intertwined. Three bodies pressed together in relief and love. Daniel quietly stood and moved toward the door, giving them privacy. But Vexithera stopped him with a raised hand. "Stay, please." Daniel hesitated, then nodded and remained by his desk. He watched as the ambassador held the cubs, one large hand cupping each small head. Vexithara's eyes were closed, and Daniel saw moisture at the corners. "I was so worried." The ambassador's voice was rough. "I thought something terrible had happened." "I thought I had lost you. We are sorry," Kes said, voice muffled against the ambassador's chest. "We did not mean to cause fear. We just wanted to explore. We are tired of always being perfect," Mira added. "We are tired of everyone watching us and judging us. We just wanted to be ourselves for a little while." Vexithara pulled back slightly to look at both cubs. "You wanted to be yourselves? Are you not yourselves when you are with me?" The question was asked with genuine confusion. Kes and Mira exchanged glances, then Kes spoke carefully. "We are cubs of the ambassador. We are representatives of the Kryn people. We are symbols of strength and honor, but sometimes we just want to be Kes and Mira." Understanding dawned on Vexithara's face, followed by pain. "I have been so focused on preparing you for the future that I forgot to let you enjoy the present. I wanted you to be strong so badly that I made you feel weak for wanting to play." "You are not weak, parent," Mira said softly. "You were protecting us the only way you knew how. But perhaps there is a better way." Vexithara looked up at Daniel. "What did you show them?" Daniel activated his screen. The video that was currently paused showed a lion pride, with cubs tumbling over each other while adults watched from nearby. Earth predators, the strongest hunters on my planet. And their young play constantly. They wrestle, they chase, they explore. That is how they learn to be strong. Vexithera watched the screen in silence. The ambassador saw the lion cubs nipping at their mother's tail, saw her patience as she let them climb on her, saw the clear affection between parent and offspring, with no loss of dignity or strength. "On your world, do predators who play with their young become weak adults?" The ambassador asked. "No, they become the strongest. Because they learn in safety, they can take risks when hunting. Because they are confident, they can lead prides. Because they were allowed to be young, they know how to be strong adults." Daniel pulled up another video, this one showing wolf cubs playing while their parents watched. "We have learned that childhood is not wasted time. It is the foundation that everything else is built on. Rush it and the foundation cracks." Vexithara pulled the cubs close again. "I have been rushing your foundation. I have been so afraid of you being weak that I made you afraid to be young. I am sorry." The apology stunned everyone in the room. Kryn did not apologize, especially not to their offspring. It showed weakness, showed uncertainty. But Vexithara spoke the words anyway because they were true. Kes hugged the ambassador tighter. "You are not weak, parent. Saying sorry is strong, perhaps. But we will have to face consequences for this. The station is in an uproar. Other species are questioning whether we Kryn are too volatile for diplomatic service." Vexithara's voice was heavy with worry. As if summoned by those words, an alert chimed on Daniel's communicator. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach sink. The Gen delegation has filed a formal complaint about the Kryn search methods. They are demanding a full council hearing. Vexithara stood, the brief moment of vulnerability hardening back into military bearing. Of course they have. The Gen have been looking for an excuse to undermine Kryn authority for years. They will use this to paint us as dangerous and unstable. Then we tell them the truth, Daniel said firmly. We explain what happened. We show them that this was not aggression, it was fear for missing children. Any parent would understand. You would testify for us? Vexithara looked at Daniel with surprise. I would testify for the truth. And the truth is that your cubs found my office and I kept them safe until they could be reunited with their parent. There is no scandal here, only a family that needed a moment to reconnect. The cubs stood on either side of their parent, each taking one of Vexithara's hands. We will face the council together, Mira said with more. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. It rose 3 stories high, with environmental pods arranged in a circle so that every species could observe every other. 43 different atmospheres were maintained simultaneously, separated by force fields that shimmered like soap bubbles. Daniel stood in the human section, wearing his formal diplomatic uniform. The gravity was standard Earth normal, the air was perfectly comfortable, but he felt like he couldn't breathe. Across the chamber, on an elevated platform, Vexithara stood rigid and alone. The cubs sat in a viewing area behind their parent, surrounded by other Kryn officials. At the center of the chamber, floating in a column of pure light, was Counselor Loomis. The ancient being had no physical form anymore, existing only as organized energy. When Loomis spoke, the words came from everywhere and nowhere at once. This emergency session has been called to address concerns raised by the Gen delegation regarding the conduct of the Kryn delegation during the search for their missing offspring. Ambassador Silthrix of the Gen, you may present your case. Silthrix rose from the Gen environmental pod. The reptilian diplomat's scales caught the light as they moved. Their voice was smooth and calculated. Honorable counselors, what we witnessed yesterday was not a search. It was aggression barely contained. The Kryn sealed corridors without authorization. They demanded access to private areas. They questioned peaceful species with threats implicit in every word. Holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing footage of Kryn guards demanding information from frightened aliens. The images were carefully selected to make the Kryn look as threatening as possible. No context was provided, no explanation of what was driving their actions. This behavior demonstrates what we have long suspected. The Kryn are too volatile, too aggressive, too driven by emotion to serve in positions of galactic authority. They are predators, and predators cannot be trusted to lead. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. Daniel could see several species who had their own young glancing between the footage and the Kryn section. Silthrix continued. We propose a formal censure of the Kryn delegation and a review of their eligibility for council positions. Species that cannot control their base instincts have no place in civilized governance. The Threxian delegate, whose crystal structure chimed softly, spoke up. I second the motion for review. Order must be maintained on this station. Daniel felt his heart sink. Without context, the case against the Kryn looked strong. He glanced at Vexithera and saw the ambassador standing absolutely still, like a statue carved from stone. Only the slight movement of the tail betrayed inner turmoil. Counselor Loomis spoke again. Before we vote, does anyone wish to speak in defense of the Kryn or provide additional context? Daniel raised his hand. The gesture felt small and inadequate in the massive chamber. I request permission to speak, Counselor. Silthrix's scales rippled with irritation. The human diplomat. What could they possibly contribute? Humans are too new to galactic politics to understand the complexities of this situation. Perhaps that fresh perspective is exactly what we need. Loomis countered. Daniel Carter, you may speak. Daniel stepped forward to the center of the human pod. His voice felt too quiet in the vast space. But the translation systems carried his words to every delegate. Honorable counselors, I was directly involved in yesterday's events. The Kryn cubs were in my office. I was the one who kept them there. That admission caused a stir. Silthrix seized on it immediately. So the human admits to harboring the cubs without notifying authorities. Perhaps we should be reviewing human conduct as well. Daniel continued as if the interruption hadn't happened. I want to tell you what I saw when those cubs came into my office. I saw two young beings who were curious and tired. Curious about the universe around them. Tired of always being watched, always being judged, always being told to be perfect. He pulled up his own holographic display, showing the security footage from his office. The cubs appeared on screen, watching Earth nature videos with wonder in their eyes. I showed them videos of predators from my world. Lions, tigers, wolves. I showed them that even the strongest hunters allow their young to play. That childhood is not weakness. It is preparation. The Vorgath security chief, Hextrem, spoke up with their multiple voices layered together. The human's account matches our security records. No other species was ever in danger during the search. Daniel nodded his thanks to Hextrem and continued. I want to ask you all a question. What would you do if your young went missing? Would you search calmly and rationally? Or would you tear apart every corner of this station until you found them? The question hung in the air. Daniel saw several delegates shift uncomfortably. He pressed on. Parental love is not rational. It is primal. It exists in every species I have ever studied, from Earth animals to the aliens I have met here. When your children are in danger, logic shuts down. All that matters is finding them and keeping them safe. A delegate from the Quailox species, whose offspring took years to mature, spoke quietly. I have 5 young. If they were lost, I would become what my ancestors were before civilization. I would become a force of nature until they were found. Other voices joined in, delegates who were parents admitting what they would do in the same situation. Daniel saw the narrative beginning to shift. He continued quickly before momentum could be lost. The Kryn were not being aggressive. They were being parents. Desperate, frightened parents who thought their children were in danger. If we punish species for loving their young too fiercely, then what kind of galactic community are we building? Silthrix tried to regain control of the narrative. This is emotional manipulation. The question is not whether the Kryn love their offspring, but whether they can control themselves in positions of authority. Before anyone could respond, a small voice cut through the chamber. May we speak? Everyone turned to look at the Kryn viewing area. Kes and Mira had stood up, their small forms dwarfed by the adults around them. Vexithera turned sharply, about to tell them to sit down, but Counselor Loomis spoke first. The young ones wish to address the council? This is highly unusual. We were there. We know what happened. We should be allowed to tell our story. Mira's voice was quiet but steady. Loomis considered this. Very well. The cubs may speak. Bring them forward. Vexithera looked ready to protest but stopped. The ambassador recognized the determination in the cubs' eyes. It was the same determination that drove Kryn warriors into battle. How could a parent deny that courage? Kes and Mira walked to the center platform, their small claws clicking on the floor. They stood together, tails intertwined for support. The translation system picked up their voices and carried them through the chamber. My name is Kes. This is my sister Mira. We are the cubs who went missing. Kes began. We want to tell you why, Mira continued. We love our parent. We love our people. But we are tired. Tired of always being perfect. Tired of always being watched. Tired of never being allowed to just be young. Kes took over. We did not run away. We just wanted to explore. We wanted to see things without someone telling us how to stand or what to say. We wanted to be cubs, not symbols. The simple honesty of their words struck harder than any diplomatic speech could have. Around the chamber, delegates who had been ready to judge now listened with new understanding. We found Daniel's office by accident, Mira said. But we stayed because he was kind. He did not tell us to be quiet or stand straight. He showed us animals from his world. He showed us that even predators play when they are young. Kes looked directly at the council. If the galaxy wants different species to work together, maybe it needs to let children be children first. How can we learn to understand each other if we are never allowed to be curious? How can we build friendships if we are always being judged? The silence that followed was profound. Even Silthrix seemed at a loss for words. How could anyone argue against children asking for the right to be young? Vexithera stepped forward, moving to stand beside the cubs. The ambassador placed one hand on each small shoulder. My cubs speak truth that shames me. I have been so focused on making them strong that I forgot they needed to be happy. I have been so worried about honor that I forgot about joy. The ambassador's voice carried through the chamber with raw honesty. I searched desperately yesterday not because of duty or honor, but because I was terrified. Terrified that I had driven my cubs away with my demands for perfection. Terrified that my focus on strength had made them afraid to be themselves. Vexithera looked at Silthrix directly. You say we Kryn are too emotional to lead. Perhaps you are right. We do feel deeply. We do love fiercely. We do fear losing those we care about. But is that truly a weakness? Or is it the foundation of why we fight so hard to protect this galaxy? The Gen ambassador had no response. Around the chamber, delegates were reconsidering their positions. What had seemed like a simple case of misconduct was revealing itself as something far more complex. Dr. Sophie Grant stepped forward from the human section. With the Council's permission, I would like to present research that may provide additional context. Loomis granted permission. Sophie activated a holographic display showing data from 30 different species. This is a comparative study of 3 months had passed since the Council hearing. Galactic Unity Station Sigma-7 looked the same from the outside, but inside, everything had changed in small but meaningful ways. The most visible change was the new recreation facility that occupied an entire section of the station. It had taken the combined efforts of 17 species to design a space that could accommodate the needs of young beings from vastly different environments. There were low-gravity zones for species from small worlds, high-temperature areas for those from desert planets, and aquatic sections for water-dwelling young. But the most popular area was the holographic environment room. Here, young beings could experience simulations of homeworlds they had never seen or explore entirely fictional environments created just for play. Today, a group of cubs from 5 different species were running through a simulation of Earth's African savanna, chasing holographic gazelles under Daniel's supervision. Daniel's official title was now Director of Youth Cultural Exchange, a position that had not existed before the incident with Kes and Mira. His office was larger, but he had kept his collection of Earth animal photos. They reminded him of where he came from and why he did this work. Kes and Mira visited him 3 times a week for what they called their learning sessions, but what Daniel considered playtime. Today they were helping him teach a group of Threxian crystal younglings about Earth mammals. The Threxians were fascinated by the concept of fur, something their species had never evolved. Why do the mammals cover their young with their bodies? A Threxian youngling asked, watching a video of a mother bear with her cubs. For warmth and protection, Mira explained before Daniel could answer. Parent mammals keep their young close until they are ready to survive alone. Like our parent does for us, the Threxian chimed thoughtfully. My parents surround me with their crystalline structure for the same reason. It is interesting that different species protect their young in different ways, but the desire to protect is the same. Daniel smiled. These spontaneous insights from the young beings never failed to impress him. They were learning lessons that many adults had taken years to understand. Across the station, Dr. Sophie Grant was in her laboratory reviewing data from the Youth Exchange program. The results were better than she had hoped. Young beings who participated in the program showed increased empathy toward other species, better problem-solving skills, and improved emotional regulation. More importantly, the program had sparked interest across the galaxy. 17 other diplomatic stations had requested copies of the guidelines. Homeworlds were establishing similar programs. The concept of giving children space to be children, regardless of species, was spreading. Sophie's communicator chimed. It was a message from Vexithara requesting a meeting. She closed her data files and headed for the Kryn quarters, curious about what the ambassador wanted to discuss. The Kryn quarters had changed, too. Where before everything had been militarily precise and cold, there were now small signs of life. Drawings made by the cubs hung on walls. Comfortable cushions were scattered around for lounging. It was still distinctly Kryn, but it was also clearly a home, not just a military outpost. Vexithara greeted Sophie at the door. Thank you for coming. I wanted to discuss something privately before I present it to the council. They settled in a sitting area. Vexithara poured a warm beverage that the Kryn traditionally shared when discussing important matters. The cubs are thriving. They are happier than I have ever seen them. They have made friends with young beings from 6 different species. They are learning and growing in ways I did not think possible. That is wonderful, Sophie said, though she sensed there was more coming. It has made me realize something. The ambassador continued. The way we Kryn raise our young is hurting them. We are so focused on creating warriors that we forget to let them be people first. I want to propose changes to Kryn education policy. I want to propose that we adopt some of the principles we have learned here. Sophie set down her cup carefully. That is a significant proposal. How do you think your people will respond? Some will be angry. Some will say I am trying to make our cubs soft and weak. Vexithara's voice was steady despite the weight of the admission. But I have seen the evidence. Cubs who are allowed to play become stronger adults, not weaker ones. I cannot ignore that truth just because it challenges our traditions. You will need allies. Other Kryn who have seen the same changes you have. Other parents who want better for their young. I know. That is why I'm starting here on this station. If I can show my people that change is possible, that our cubs can be both strong and happy, then maybe they will listen. Sophie thought about the long road ahead. Cultural change was never easy, especially for a species as traditional as the Kryn. But she had faith in Vexithara's determination. And I will support you however I can. The data clearly shows that balanced childhood development produces better outcomes. Meanwhile, in the recreation facility, something unexpected was happening. Ambassador Silthrix of the Gen had arrived with a young Gen who appeared distressed. The Gen youngling was hyperventilating, their scales flashing with anxiety colors. Daniel noticed immediately and approached. Is everything okay? Silthrix looked uncomfortable asking for help, especially from Daniel. My offspring is experiencing stress. They are expected to perform at a diplomatic function tonight, and the pressure has become overwhelming. I was told that you might be able to help. Daniel knelt down to the young Jen's level. Hey there, my name is Daniel. You look like you could use a break. Want to see something interesting? The youngling nodded hesitantly. Daniel led them to a quiet corner and pulled up videos of Earth reptiles. Look, these are lizards from my world. They are related to really big reptiles called dinosaurs that lived millions of years ago. The young Jen's breathing began to slow as they watched the videos. Their scales shifted to calmer colors. Kess and Mira noticed what was happening and came over quietly. Are you nervous about tonight? Mira asked gently. We get nervous too sometimes. Everyone expects me to be perfect, the young Jen whispered. I am supposed to greet ambassadors and answer questions and never make mistakes, but I am scared I will say something wrong. Kess sat down beside them. We used to feel like that too. Our parent expected us to always be perfect representatives of the Kryn. It was exhausting. What changed? The young Jen asked. Our parent learned that it is okay for us to be young, that we do not have to be perfect all the time, that making mistakes is how we learn, Mira explained. Daniel glanced at Silthrix, who was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. Sometimes parents need to learn that childhood is not wasted time. It is the foundation for everything that comes after. The young Jen spent the next hour with the Kryn cubs, watching videos and playing simple games. By the time they left, they were calm and even smiling slightly. Silthrix approached Daniel privately before leaving. I judged you harshly, the Jen ambassador said quietly. I judged the Kryn harshly. I thought showing emotion was weakness. But watching my offspring suffer under pressure I have placed on them, I realize I was wrong. It takes courage to admit that, Daniel said, and it takes even more courage to change. Silthrix's scales rippled with an emotion Daniel had never seen from them before. Something like gratitude mixed with determination. May my offspring return? To participate in your program, of course. Any young being is welcome here. That evening, Daniel sat in his office catching up on paperwork when Vexthera arrived with the cubs. It was their regular visiting time, but the ambassador seemed to have something on their mind. I am proposing changes to Kryn childhood education, the ambassador said without preamble. I want our people to understand what I have learned here, that strong adults come from happy children, not from children forced to be warriors before they are ready. That is ambitious. Daniel said carefully, it is necessary. I look at my cubs now and see the difference. They are still learning strength and discipline, but they are also learning joy and curiosity. They are becoming whole people, not just warriors. Kess and Mira had already settled by Daniel's desk, pulling up their favorite Earth animal videos. They were completely comfortable here now, treating his office like a second home. You know what I realized? Vexthara continued, watching the cubs. That day when they disappeared, I was not just afraid they were hurt. I was afraid they were unhappy, and that fear taught me more about being a parent than all my training ever did. Daniel nodded. Fear for our children's happiness is just as important as fear for their safety, maybe more important. Because what is the point of surviving if you are miserable? Exactly. And that is what I want other Kryn parents to understand. Our traditions come from a harsh world where only the strongest survived. But we are not on that world anymore. We are building something new. We should be building new traditions too. Over the next few weeks, word of the changes on Sigma 7 continued to spread. Lieutenant Morrison, who had initially seen the missing cubs as a security threat, now ran regular games and activities for young beings from multiple species. He claimed it was part of his security duties, keeping the young ones occupied so they did not wander into dangerous areas. But everyone could see he enjoyed it. The Threxian delegate who had originally supported censuring the Kryn